Welcome to the daily Cambridge Nedbank COPpuccino. For today's canter through the COP17 Carnival, I'm joined by Minister Trevor Manual, who is South Africa's Minister for National Planning. Mr. Manual, you've co-chaired the Transitional Committee on the design of the Green Climate Fund this year. That's a UN process. Has that been a happy experience for you?
I dealt with UN processes in 2 successive years. Last year I was privileged to serve on the SG's high-level advisory group on finance to try and answer the question whether the $100 billion a year could be raised. That was pretty exciting but it wasn't as representative. And so there were very, very sharp and strong debates. In the end, we settled with something that was second best. For instance, the idea of financial transactions tax was very strongly held by a number of participants in that group. But some people were prepared to walk away and collapse the group if that remained on the table. So we amended that, and so we emerged without it. In the context of the Transitional Committee, I think the group was as representative as you could have, a fair microcosm of the 200 or so countries represented. Very, very strong debates, very strongly held views on either side. But I think we were able to develop a progressive course.
Are you comfortable with the balance that was found? Is the proposed governing instrument?
I'm pretty comfortable with the balance that was found. The fact that we have some definition of an international legal personality for the Green Climate Fund, which was redlined by some countries. The fact that we were able to define a role for the private sector, which was redlined by a different group of countries, is indicative of the balance that we were able to strike.
How do you balance the need for nimbleness on the one hand with inclusivity and credible decision making on the other?
You know, the big challenge is understanding that if you want an organization to run $100 billion a year, it can't be 2 men and a dog. It would be an organization that disburses 2.5 times what the World Bank does. It has to be a massive organization with well-constructed systems. That's what the Green Climate Fund must grow into. It isn't there. And you will find in the introduction and terms of reference in our interpretation, we actually lay the basis for a learning organization. The learning organization must self-evaluate and be able to be accountable, especially in that early period. And I believe that we're going to find a lot of strength in developing that approach.
2 days ago you tabled the report at the plenary session. There was some pushback. It's gone out to consultation now. What do you expect to emerge? And do you agree with the proposition that if Durban fails to establish the Green Climate Fund, then COP17 will have failed?
I agree with the view that if we can't establish the GCF, then COP17 would have failed. That is why it's paramount that we try and deal with the issues. We can't open this report again. I'm pretty clear that having tested the ideas in the way that the Transitional Committee did, you're likely to come to exactly the same point.
There's been suggestions that one might also establish an African Green Climate Fund to go alongside or underneath the Global Green Climate Fund, coming from the AU and the Committee of 10 finance ministers. Does that make sense to you?
You know, I don't think that we must allow in the short term for any opting out. We need a system that records both commitments and disbursements. We need to have an accountable system, and we need a global system. And you know, if there were surplus cash on the table, then you could have a series of regional funds. But right now, I'd prefer to see all hands on deck to construct that single global green climate fund, because the major beneficiaries would have to be Africa. You know, sometimes we allow heads of state to take decisions. In Copenhagen, it was agreed $100 billion of new and additional financial resources. Now, you need a measure for new and additional, and you need to ensure that you aren't substituting for ODA commitments that were made at Glen Eagles, for instance. And in the way in which these issues are dealt with, it's very important that you don't actually allow people to park away something, pretending that they're meeting their full obligations.
In the short to middle term, where should the Green Climate Fund's balance be found between adaptation, transfer and mitigation action and funding?
I think it's primarily in adaptation. The windows, I think, we didn't construct the windows in relative terms, but because it's a transfer from the rich world to the poor world, the emphasis is likely to be on adaptation primarily.
Trevor Manuel, thank you very much for joining the Daily Cappuccino. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.